David. That's my favorite. Can you get me the box and papers for the Jurassic Park? I got you. Hey guys, it's Cam from Crafts and Tailored. In this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we're talking about a 1996 reference 18238 Day-Date with a very rare and highly sought after fossil dial. The watch has received the nickname the Jurassic Park because the dial variant is actually made out of fossilized material. So it's a stone dial and it falls into that stone exotic dial category. And what's interesting about this specific example and this specific example of stone that's used in day dates is it's actually the most sought after and the rarest stone that is seen in a stone dial day date or within the stone dial series of Rolex Day-Date. So I wanted to take a moment to highlight this watch, talk about it because it's very interesting and cool. And we've been featuring a lot of stone dials within our shop. We've been kind of hunting them out. And I think sometimes what happens is when you acquire something that is rare, like a stone dial, what ends up happening is, again, I'm not trying to be too much of a hippie or like talk too much about voodoo here on the channel, but you kind of start to attract these things. So I don't know if it's because I've become hyper aware or the team has become hyper aware of stone dials and we've been getting a lot of requests for them, but we seem to be attracting them. And so it's kind of fun and cool because we are working our way through the various stone dials and bringing them into our collection. Another thing that's interesting, I think, within the market, the vintage watch market segment right now is that the day dates are kind of increasing in popularity, and exotic dial variants of the day date, like stone dials, are becoming more and more popular. These dials are immensely popular now. And the other thing that I forgot to kind of mention about this Jurassic Park or fossil dial is a good number of them were actually adorned with diamonds for the hour markers, which is very interesting because if you look at some of the other stone dials, in many cases, they won't have any reference point for, hour placement. So you kind of look at the watch and guess as to where that would be. You're like, I guess it's like 5:30-ish, maybe it's 4:30. I mean, if you look closely, you can tell, right? But the nice thing about this is that it is gem set, and it's, I'm not really a big fan of gem set watches. I think that there are some, I like gem set dials, but maybe not gem set watches, and that's something that is kind of an interesting thing. So I wanted to take a second to highlight this 18238 with this fossil dial because it's the only one that we've ever had. They seldomly come up for sale, and this is a mint and superb example, so it makes a great discussion point for this stuff. So the reason why I like the stone dials and the natural materials that are used in this series of dial, whether it be wood or stone, is that each watch is unique unto itself. So the reason why I like that from a collectability perspective is that there's not one or two stones that are exactly alike. Even in, like, for example, like the Onyx dials, which is a watch within the day date and in the date just range that has become very, very popular and highly sought after. If you really look closely at the stone, there are minor little natural imperfections in the stone that make them unique. So I think that that's really, really cool. I also like the idea of Rolex incorporating a natural material into the dial of the watch itself, which I think is just kind of artful and cool and makes sense because, gold is essentially a natural resource. And I think to pair yellow gold or white gold with another natural resource or something that is limited in its availability, I think is kind of a unique and fun idea. So definitely like this. This specific example is from 1996. Again, it's a reference 18238. So in 1988, Rolex released the caliber 3155, also known as the double quick set, which allows for the quick setting of the date and the date complications by rotating the crown clockwise and counterclockwise while in the second position of the crown being out. So a really nice feature because obviously with 1803, which is like the, an earlier variant of the day date, to set the day and the date can be tiresome because you're rotating the crown clockwise and counterclockwise in 24-hour intervals to basically set the day and the date. With the Cal 3155, essentially it allows for, quick set day and date function, which makes this nice because if you are, obviously it's a Day-Date, it's gold. If you're not wearing the watch daily and then you go back to pick up the watch out of the watch box, it makes setting the time and the day and the date very easily, which is kind of a nice feature to have. I wouldn't say necessarily that the 18238s are transitional in nature. They can be depending on, when they were produced. This one being in 1996, I guess you could put it in that category of neo-vintage, but it's kind of in a category of its own because it is a stone dial, and we'll dive into the details about this example specifically, but they're kind of a thing of their own. So they're not really in a neo-vintage category necessarily, but you will see some crossover traits within the 18238 non-stone dial segment. So I guess it could be technically a neo-vintage watch, but they're kind of their own thing, if that makes sense. So the fossil dial is really, really unique because it is like fossilized organic material. I think, and if anybody knows the actual name of the stone or the fossil, please provide that in the description below, because I've done some pretty extensive research and I can't find the exact name of this fossil. It basically, to me, looks like kind of like coral polyps or something like that has been fossilized. Rolex is pretty protective of some of the materials and things that they use, but this is unique, and I haven't seen this specific stone used, or stone fossil rather, used in anything outside of Rolex Day-Dates. There's actually two variants of the stone as well, or the fossil rather. There's this version, which is kind of like a sandy, kind of prehistoric-y bone-looking type of fossil, and then there's also kind of like a gray or a taupey version of this as well. Hold on. Oh my God. I'm literally in the middle of recording a what is on my wrist for the fossil dial.
Can you put me in it?
You're now in the video. Say hi, everyone, to Mike.
Hi, everyone.
This is Mike.
What a beautiful watch you have on your wrist right now.
Isn't it nice? You know what, Mike? Maybe we should do a weekly show and we should just call it Watchsta, and we'll eat a bowl of pasta while talking about our watches.
Yes, I think that's a great idea.
You're a pretty likable and entertainable guy.
I'm gonna pitch it to Netflix. I don't think your reach is big enough.
Well, I dabble.
Goodbye.
Bye. Well, that was Mike. Mike, if you follow us on Instagram, has been featured in some of our stories and stuff. Mike is a good friend of mine out of New York. Mike actually just joined our team about 2 weeks ago. So if you sign up for our wait list, which is a feature that has been increasingly popular, and also we get a lot of requests for stone dials on our wait list, you may receive an email from Mike. So congratulations, Mike. Welcome to the team. And Mike is also a big pasta fanatic, as am I. I know I've been really hitting the gym, working out a lot. You can't tell, but my favorite food on the planet is carbs and pasta. So we were talking a little bit about the dial. It's a really unique material. It's very beautiful. When you loop the dial, it kind of has like this, I don't want to say geometric because the shapes are a little bit more organic, but they're kind of circular, and it's really interesting when you loop the dial. It looks very like almost three-dimensional, which is another kind of cool trait with these stone dials. They have depth and dimension that you kind of don't get in more of a flat or like a satin dial that you would see in kind of the more stereotypical, Rolex Day-Date or Datejust. So again, the watch is from 1996. So the watch is a full set example. So it comes with its inner and outer boxes. So here's our outer box, which is really, really nice. The watch also does come with a couple of accessories, which are really cool. So this was a gift that was given. We've got this like Rolex leather notebook, which is really, really pretty. And it kind of has like this, I guess you could almost call it like a diver down stripe, which you can see in some of the sport Rolex boxes where they have like this, basically like this cross, that kind of cross pattern that goes across. It kind of looks like the diver down flag. I don't think that's what it is, but that's what it kind of looks like. And it's basically like this notebook that was included with the watch. So this was probably given as a gift with the watch when it was originally purchased in 1996. Rolex has some amazing accessories, and this was one of the things that was probably given with the watch as like a thank you or whatever when the watch was purchased. There was probably a pen given with this as well, and the pen, I imagine, is somewhere out there in the world. The watch does retain its original early big buckle Day-Date box, which is really fun and cool. So really kind of pretty, presentation box. And then on the inside of the box, we have like the horseshoe and all that kind of stuff. This watch also does retain its papers. Where the papers are, no idea. Tyler? So, one question that could be asked is, how do we keep all of the papers and all the accessories and all the boxes and everything organized when we have multiple boxes and multiple papers and all that kind of stuff? We actually keep a big binder and a folder. Come on in. Tyler's making a cameo. He's very camera shy. Thank you. So we actually have like a vault in our office, obviously, and we have an offsite vault, but we basically keep like a Ziploc folder, this big folder with labels on them for which hang tag, which paper, which whatever goes with which watch. And then when it ultimately sells, what we do is we unzip that, package everything back up, and then send it out. And then we also label the boxes as well, so that way we know which box goes with which watch and all that kind of stuff. So kind of a tedious task, but really simple in terms of kind of keeping things organized. But in any case, okay, so one thing that I think is interesting about, and I think something that could be a good discussion point, is when the authorized dealers acquired watches from Rolex in the 80s and in the 90s, in many cases, the authorized dealers were also authorized dealers for other brands. Today, when you are in Hong Kong or when you're in Los Angeles or when you're in New York and you go to Rolex, you're actually going to a boutique that sells just only Rolex. But if you really peel back the layers of that onion, you'll realize that it's like Ben Bridge, or that it's Geary's, or that it's whatever, and that is basically an entire boutique dedicated to just the Rolex brand. So you're not necessarily buying a watch directly from Rolex, you're buying it through an authorized dealer, and in many cases, that authorized dealer, in order to get a large allocation of watches from Rolex, is actually setting up a standalone boutique that is just for Rolex and Rolex alone. Very few boutiques actually will have Rolex alongside, Patek, alongside Audemars Piguet, alongside et cetera, But back in the day, that's the way that it worked. You would have like a jeweler or an authorized dealer that in many cases had other brands in, different showcases along with Rolex. Additionally, the other thing that's interesting about the allocation of watches and the distribution of these watches, and ultimately I guess you would say the wholesale purchasing of these watches by the authorized dealer back in the day, was that there would be watches that would be allocated to these authorized dealers, and then they would slowly sell through that inventory. So in some cases, you can see a watch like in this one. In this case, the watch was originally produced in 1996. The watch actually sold in 1999. And the reason why I know that is because the watch retains, along with its original box, inner outer boxes, along with this, some of the accessories, it actually retains its original paperwork, which is amazing. The watch is a T serial, which is indicative of a production period of 1996. But what's interesting is we have this stamp on the paperwork that says October 5th of 1999. So the watch actually was sold in 1999. One cool thing too about some of the paperwork out of the 1990s is you have punched serial numbers here, and then you actually have a printed tag here. And then in some cases that actually matches the hang tags as well. So they're depending on, the area of distribution. In some cases, you'll actually have hang tags and then little stickers and punch paperwork and all that kind of stuff that has the serial numbers on them. The watch was retailed overseas, and it does include its original instruction booklets, some other material here about how to operate the crown of the watch and, operate the the complications. And then it has this Rolex Masters book and guarantee, which is really cool. And then in the back of this book, we actually have a corresponding date of purchase along with the serial number and everything like that. So it's interesting that the watch was, produced and manufactured in 1996, but it wasn't until 1999 that the watch actually sold. And I think for a watch like this, that also somewhat makes sense because it is an exotic dial. Back then, it was a dial that was unique and kind of its own thing. I think that when the dial was in current production, it was kind of an odd variant of the dial and probably not a dial that really sold a lot because it is so unique and interesting. It's kind of like one of those things where you're really into it or you don't like it. It's kind of like Paul Newman's also. In many cases, authorized dealers were pulling out Paul Newman dials and putting in standard Daytona dials because people didn't like that exotic dial format of a Paul Newman. The watch probably wasn't popular. Same thing, again, kind of with Paul Newman's. Paul Newman's were kind of the redheaded stepchild for a really long time until people started to realize that there was an artistry and kind of a uniqueness to the dial. And then, the low production numbers and the low popularity ultimately made them more popular and desirable due to the limited nature of them. So kind of same thing with this. And again, it's not uncommon for us to see a watch that was produced a couple years before the sales date because it may have been sitting in a dealer's inventory for a good number of years. It may have been sitting in the showcase. It may have just been in their back stock and, it could have been just in reserve and, the retailer was moving things that were quote unquote more popular or more desirable at the time and then finally, retailed this. So kind of an interesting little piece of forensic analysis, I guess, which is a big part of what it is that we do when we look at watches like this, when we, acquire them and ultimately authenticate them. So again, incredible watch. I wanted to feature this because we've been doing a lot of interesting stone dials and I wanted to take this opportunity to share this with you. Again, 18238, double quick. It's from 96. It's the Jurassic Park. It's incredible. It's a watch that I've really fallen in love with. The other cool thing too that I wanted to kind of just mention is that the watch was most likely worn, but very lightly. The watch retains its original case back sticker, which is really nice. The case is unpolished, shows a little bit of wear, but the bracelet shows very minimal stretch. I'll show you guys that. So I'm not sure if you can get that, Nick, but bracelet's pretty stacked, which is really nice. The case retains all of its original factory finishing. The bezel is, just unpolished, really nice and fluted. It kicks out a lot of light. And again, it is a gem set dial, but what's kind of cool is it kind of goes with this watch. The diamonds on the dial seem to accent the fossilized material in the stone really nicely. So really incredible example. And again, really excited to share this with you guys. So as always, guys, I'll provide a link in the description below so that you can check this out, as well as the article that we wrote about fossil and stone and wood dials. I'll provide a link in the description below there. And if you're not doing so already, be sure to follow us on Instagram. We post a lot of great watches and updates to the Instagram. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I don't know, am I missing anything else? I think I'm good. So thanks for tuning in, guys. As always, I will see you in the next one.